Hey everyone, this is Darby McDevitt. I'm a narrative director at Ubisoft, Montreal, and I was the lead writer on this game, Assassin's Creed IV Black Flag. It's a 10-year anniversary. It's been 10 years since we've been at sea with this game. I'm really excited to go back and have a look at it. It's been a long time since I've looked at this game. I tend to actually not play games that I've worked on after they come out, because when you spend so long making a game, you play it 1,000 times and you go over every single little scene. I'm particularly fond of this game because the cast was so fantastic. I mean, I spent a lot of time writing the script myself. I wrote the main path of this game, the main story. Other writers worked on some of the side content, but I spent a lot of time alone working on this story, or often with a guy named Mustafa Merak, the quest director, and we carved out this story. But the writing actually, it happens alone, and so when we finally got a cast together, that's really when the story took shape, and so I'll forever remember this game because of that. One of the things I remember very clearly about the beginning of this game is we had just come off of AC3, which had a very, very long, drawn-out, almost literary opening. It was very experimental and I thought very bold, and I really enjoyed it, but it did take quite a long time to get to the action, to get into the character that had been advertised, right, Connor. And you play quite a few hours as his father, so we thought for this game we ought to just get right into the action. There's a kind of a term we use, time to fantasy, and the time to fantasy in AC3, the time to getting to Connor the assassin, was quite long. But here, the time to pirate is about half a second, right? We wanted to just get you right into the pirate fantasy, just for a brief moment, and really let you experience what this game is going to be about. It's going to be about this guy, Edward Kenway.
Why not sail with the King's Navy? Earn a proper wage, sail under gentlemen.
Sod the Navy's gentlemen.
This guy here, you see him in a flashback with his wife. Here he's kind of professing some noble goals. He wants to be a privateer, which was kind of a legal form of piracy. If you were a privateer, you worked for a specific government. In this case, he'd worked for the British government. And because of the War of Spanish Succession was going on, he would have been going out and raiding Spanish ships, probably French ships too, maybe Portuguese ships, but not British ships. And what would happen often is that these guys would go down as privateers, and they'd get a little bit hungry. Maybe they'd get a little bit rowdy as well. Maybe they'd see a British ship, and they know that they're not supposed to raid it, but they do it anyway. And that's when you cross from privateering into piracy, when you're no longer beholden to the country that hired you. So here he's promising his wife he'll go to the West Indies, the Caribbean, be a privateer, and now we say, oh, 2 years later, he's a pirate. This next scene with where he washes up on a shore with an assassin named Duncan Walpole establishes him pretty clearly as like, oh, he's thought of as a pirate, and Duncan himself is British, so the fact that they don't get along, and it should cue you into the fact that Edward is on the wrong side of the law in every country.
I can pay you. Isn't that the sound you pirates like best? 100 escudos.
There was a long time where we had the beginning of this game, we wanted to maybe start it with a little bit less antagonism between Edward and this assassin that he meets. We tried for a little while to have it be a little bit slower and more exploratory, where Duncan Walpole would be bleeding out on the ground. This guy that you see here, where he's going to wash up with him. He'd be bleeding out, and Edward would notice that this guy, had some wealth, and maybe if he befriended this guy, he could get some money out of him. So he would play nice, and he would search the island for some water, and then at the top of the sort of the pinnacle of one of these hills or mountains, he'd see another ship, and like, okay, we can get off this island. I'll go back and tell this guy Duncan But when he'd get back to him, Duncan would be dead. And so he'd take his identity, as he does in the final game. But again, I think the sort of time to fantasy concept was like, well, let's get you into combat too. Let's get you doing some hand-to-hand combat, some parkour. So eventually the idea was changed to start them off more antagonistically, have Edward be already interested in his wealth. Maybe he wants to rob him. And of course, Duncan Walpole can smell that. And so he's like, he calls him a pirate. And then so now we get into this antagonism. The idea was like maybe that Edward's going to chase him down, see what he's made of. But the guy keeps escalating. He starts firing shots at Edward. Here, the gun was wet, so that's why it wouldn't go off. That would often happen. The water would soak your black powder, and you couldn't fire your weapons. So here he goes. He's like, oh dang, and he got hit. But now he's crossed the line, Mr. Duncan Walpole. You've attracted the ire of Edward Kenway, most ferocious pirate in these West Indies. So it can't end well now. So this was our other answer to the time to fantasy. It's we're gonna get you into some combat. The idea of dual wielding cutlasses, I don't know where that came from. I think it might have come from maybe our game director or maybe our animation director. But it was kind of cool, like 2 cutlasses, and then of course the four pistols, a brace of pistols. That was actually very, very common at the time, because again, like you can't load these things very quickly, so you need 4 guns. That's 4 bullets, for eagle-eyed fans, I've seen a number of people point this out, and so I'm glad they got it. But because we were doing sort of the birth of a fake assassin here, he's going to read this letter from somebody named Laureano Torres in Havana. He's going to see that this Torres guy is expecting a delivery from Duncan Walpole. So Edward thinks, as a pirate would, hey, I'll just pretend to be this guy, and I'll see if I can collect the money. So he's stealing this guy's identity, and so we thought it'd be funny to do an inverted version of when Ezio gets his robes. So you'll see we actually even shot it similarly, similar angles, similar movements. Holds up that costume, all right. Nice 18th century, early 18th century assassin costume. But the hidden blade's damaged. Chuck that away. Don't need that. And even this moment where it's like, okay, hero shot. And then boom, puts on the hood, but then it's too hot for this, so I'm gonna pull down the hood. So we've dispatched with 2 of the most iconic parts of the assassin right there.
Good morning, sir. Would I be correct in thinking you are I am indeed. I thought as much. Woods Rogers.
Fast forwarding a little bit, this was fun. So this is the culmination of his scheme. He's going to go to Havana, pretend to be an assassin, walks right into a nest of Templars. Of course, Edward has no idea who these people are. This guy's Woods Rogers. He's a real person. He's actually quite a spectacular figure at the time. He's a really interesting guy. He has a huge scar on his face. We don't really get into it. I think you can probably read about it in the Codex, but he actually had this moment where he got hit in the face with a musket ball, and apparently it lodged into like the back of his mouth, and they had to surgically remove it. So we imagined he had like a really wicked scar on his face. This guy's Julien Ducasse. He's not a real guy. We invented him. I wish he were real. His outfit is amazing. He's very swashbuckling. And we created a French character just because the different nations at the time that would have been in the West Indies would have been the British, the Spanish, the French, and the Portuguese primarily. And we actually at one time thought about having the French as an entire faction, having French ships sail around. But in the end, we went with just British and Spanish with just a little touch of Portuguese at some points in the game. You always have to make compromises when you make games this big.
Where did you find all these?
I did not find them. I took them. These are souvenirs.
Here, one of the fun things we liked was that because Edward doesn't know what the Assassins and Templars are, he's going to learn what they are through osmosis and just by being curious, and that the Templars are going to teach him how to be an assassin, simply because they're kind of, in a weird way, assassin fanboys. So we had this whole thing where he learns how to shoot, he learns how to use the hidden blade because the Templars are calling out like, oh, can you do one of those wicked like aerial assassinations? Can you do that thing where you like pull him into a hay bale? So Edward learns just by kind of trial and error, learning, you know, what these Templars want of him. And here we're gonna go finally see the Grand Master in this region the Grand Master of the Templars in this region, a guy named Laureano Torres. He also was an interesting guy, historically pretty solid guy, I think, from what I remember reading. So we didn't want to portray him in any overtly evil manner, and in fact, as I've always kind of maintained, the way to make this game work for us, the kind of story we wanted to tell, it was actually important to think of Edward himself as the villain. So you're actually kind of playing the villain. And there's this, what I'd call a complementary tension between the gameplay, which is all about killing Templars and finding treasure, finding this idea of setting up this objective of finding the observatory, which is kind of portrayed as the ultimate treasure that Edward thinks he can turn into a monetary reward. That's the gameplay objective. But the story objective is that Edward wants to be a good person. He wants to you know, be a man of quality. He wants to go back to his wife with something to show for it. So I think pulling against those things, the player wants to be a pirate. That's the game that he bought. That's the gameplay is all about being a pirate, boarding ships, and you kind of never want that to end. And so that pulls against the story, which is at some point Edward needs to leave it behind and go home and be the man he promised he would be. And so I like that kind of tension between the story and the gameplay. And in that sense, Edward himself is the villain, because, or maybe I should say it's the player's the villain. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Edward's the good man, the player's the villain. The player wants to keep being a pirate, and Edward just wants to go home. And if you just put the game down and you know, stop playing, then you'd win, as is the case with a lot of tragic games.
Convened at last, and in such continental company. England, France, Spain, citizens of sad and corrupted empires. But you are Templars now, the secret and true legislators of the world. Please, hold out your hands.
So yeah, we also had this thing where we introduced Edward into almost a kind of a Templar ritual. We'd seen a lot of assassin rituals in past games. We wanted to do a kind of a Templar ritual. And here it's Laureano Torres espouses what could be called something like the Templar's Creed, or you know, the Templar's rules, whatever. I think when we first wrote this, it was quite a long cutscene, unbearably long. And these kind of things are cool for world building for the fans of the lore, but there's not. The longer they go on, there's not a lot of drama. So we decided to cut it in half and let you control Edward in the second half. And as we were watching it, watching players walk around, you know, playtesters walk around this table as the dialogue was going on, we had the idea that Edward could just pickpocket them, because you know, you're a pirate. You got to keep being a pirate at all costs. I actually don't like that we eventually put in an objective, because then it gave people the idea, and I was much more interested in seeing if people had the idea themselves. But here, I think, you know, there's a lot of expository dialogue going on, and it's less important for the drama. So letting people explore this space is kind of nice. You see in the back there's a fourth character, El Tiburon. That means shark in Spanish. We just gave him like a cool nickname. Thought it'd be cool if a guy was walking around called Shark. Mr. Shark.
Indeed they will. But thanks to Duncan and the information he has delivered, the assassins won't be a problem for much longer. All will be made clear tomorrow, gentlemen. when you meet the sage for yourselves. Until then...
So here we have, like, Edward's, he's taking advantage of his situation. We just saw him, like, steal something off the table. The basic premise is that Edward's getting in over his head, and when he finally gets back to being a pirate, he's going to use a lot of the things he learned here and take them and try to parlay them into something for himself.
God sink me for this pittance. 1,000 reals for those maps.
When Edward comes back from this little Templar meeting, we kind of wanted to portray him as a guy who's perpetually dissatisfied. And here he's angry at the reward he got. His scheme worked. He should be kind of happy, but I think the amount of money he got, he's not happy. So now he comes up with this idea of, like, now I'm going to go look for this place called the Observatory. I'm gonna try to, like, get ahead of the Templars. He still doesn't quite know what he's gotten into. And this is actually a side of his personality that I remember when we were reviewing scripts. Some people who reviewed the script thought they were a little worried that people wouldn't like Edward very much. They thought he was a little too disagreeable. For me, I didn't really worry about that. I always thought it's okay to play someone disagreeable. I always feel like if the gameplay is really interesting and compelling, you'll sort of accept the character you are, and as long as it goes interesting places, then people will be okay with that. But it's definitely, people did have a problem with him, and that reaction persisted through, when the game came out. Some people didn't like Edward, but the whole point, I think, was that he has to start in a bad place and get to a good place, and this is why I say he's the villain of this story. And there we go. There's El Tiburon popping in. There actually used to be a fight here, but it was going to be a fight that it was like a force fail. That's what we call it when you fight a boss and we make you lose. A lot of the Souls games have kind of force fails at the beginning. Like Sekiro has a force fail where you have to get your arm cut off. We wanted to do it here so that later Edward, when he faced El Tiburon at the end, there could be this feeling of, now, okay, this guy bested me once, now I bested him. There's remnants of that dialogue in the final confrontation, but unfortunately we had to cut the fight out, and so now it goes right into a cutscene. So now he's on a prison ship. This kind of little contraption that they're locked in is actually a pretty identical facsimile of how they would actually lock prisoners in place. Like if someone got out of hand on a ship, they had these bars on the ground. They'd slip your legs through these shackles, and there you'd be, and you'd get to sit there for who knows how long. Even the biscuit that they threw at Edward, that biscuit was modeled after a biscuit that I saw on a pirate ship. I think it was Nelson's ship. That it's dry docked in the south of England. I want to say Portsmouth. And I just took a picture of this like plate of biscuits, and I'm like, okay, yeah, very common, very very dry, lasts for months, very stale. For my money, this is actually one of the best, probably top 3 quests in the entire game. It fulfills the fantasy and premise of the whole game so well. Starting below deck, starting with nothing, creeping in the darkness of the below decks, going above deck, running around, freeing your fellow sailors, swinging from ship to ship. Just that free, swashbuckling feeling. I think it's everything we imagined this game would be, all right here. Putting a crew together, even. If there's one thing this game lacked, I think there was not enough of sort of going below deck. I always felt like there's that rumor. I'm not sure how true this was, but a lot of people we talked to said that one of the reasons that pirates wore eye patches was not because they had any injured eyes, but because they wanted to keep one eye free of light pollution, so that if they went below deck where it's very dark, they could lift the eye patch, and immediately their eyes would be attuned to the darkness, because they wouldn't want to be surprised by anyone, hiding in the dark. When we board ships, we don't ever go below deck, and I kind of wish we would have found a way to make that work, although it's hard to see how. It would be very tight space, especially on a lot of the smaller ships. But nonetheless, this mission fulfills that fantasy, which is great. And here we go, like now we've stolen a new ship. This is going to be Edward's ship, the Jackdaw eventually, and now we're just fighting through a hurricane. This hurricane was actually a historical event as well. There's a lot of historical events that we sneak into this game that aren't obvious. They aren't as obvious as like something, say, like the American Revolution. But nonetheless, this game is chock full of them. They're not as well known, so they kind of pass by unnoticed. But this is the sinking of the Spanish fleet off the coast of Florida, and it was basically treasure fleets that spilled all their treasure in a hurricane, and for years afterwards, people would find wreckage of this event wash up on the coast of Florida. We're saying basically that Edward was the one ship that survived it. I also think we did, in the planning stages of this game, have a moment where you would actually go ashore. I can't even remember why you would go ashore. Maybe we actually would have the ship that you were on wreck, and you would go ashore and gather together some people and then steal the one ship that had survived. But we kind of reversed all that. But nonetheless, this is where finally Edward gets a ship. He meets his first mate, Adewale, who becomes an important character throughout the story, and also gets his own amazing game in Freedom Cry. So yeah, here we go. Oh yeah, this is the quest where we actually infiltrate an assassin's stronghold. For, I think, Assassin's Creed fans out there, one of the things that was an interesting challenge for us in trying to decide how to portray the assassins in this is that up until now we'd always had the assassins in Europe and the Middle East. And then, of course, AC3 came out and kind of brought the assassins over. There was a small contingent of assassins in the American colonies. But I always wondered, because in assassin lore, we had already set up that the Assassin-Templar conflict had been going for millennia, like literally thousands upon thousands of years, 75,000 years in some cases, if we go all the way back to the first Civ, and we imagine that some version of the Templar-Assassin conflict started back then in our universe. So it became kind of a difficult problem to say, well, if the Assassin-Templar conflict has been going on for thousands of years, do we portray the human migration over the planet Earth as being the correct one? The people of the Americas, the Native Americans who were there prior to the Europeans arriving, had come over from a land bridge. The dominant theory is that they'd come over from a land bridge from what is now Russia, gone through Alaska and down and populated North America, and North America first, South America second. But if that had happened thousands of years before, would the assassin order have gone with them? And we kind of decided at the time we wrote AC4 that some version of this fight, whether or not they were called assassins, kind of did go over the bridge and migrate down a few thousand years before. And maybe it evolved into its own thing, but the symbol itself had to remain. That's kind of what they called them. And now and as James Kidd here explains at some point, like, now that Europeans have had contact with the New World, now they've kind of joined up. They've settled their differences, if they had any.
Not a word. Come on.
A great disappointment you are, Thatch. His mind's made up to stay, he says. It's a solid.
So yeah, let's jump forward all the way to Blackbeard. This too, of course, is a historical event. Blackbeard was, of course, an amazing character to write. Charles Vane was an amazing character to write. Both of them historical characters. Blackbeard played by an incredible actor, Mark Bonnar. Charles Vane by Ralph Ineson, really well known for like his roles now in The Witch, or much earlier, The Office, the British version of The Office. Mark Bonar's in a great show called Catastrophe, I think it is. Anyway, had an incredible amount of fun finding these characters. Blackbeard was particularly interesting to write because we wanted all those beautiful contradictions that he's kind of known to have. Ferocious, but and intimidating, projected this like aspect of the devil, but was not known to have killed anyone personally. Just kind of a consummate actor, I guess. Here we're pretty far into the story. Blackbeard has kind of decided he's going to retire, and he's telling Edward, this is kind of the last of it. Yeah, we're celebrating my retirement. Edward, though, still on his sort of this foolish quest to find the observatory, feels like there's something strange in the crowd, and decides to investigate. This is a fairly well recorded historical moment, and we wanted to honor it to some degree, but I think Blackbeard's final lines before he died are recorded in the general history of pirates, but I wanted to write something that was a little more resonant with the game you were playing. So we'll get to it. It's coming, but I want to lead up to it properly. The original line was a little bit longer. It eventually becomes in a world without gold we might have been heroes. The original line was a bit longer, and as we were trying to film the fight scene, Mark, playing Blackbeard, was having trouble sort of getting the whole thing out and having it feel natural. And so our animation director, Kama, she was also the performance director for the actors. She was directing them, and she just said, "Darby, this line has to be shorter, and you have about 5 minutes to shorten it because we're shooting." So I think me and Mark and Kama probably just road tested a few shorter versions of the line. I don't actually remember what the full line was. I have a tendency to be very wordy when I write, and then the fun thing is actually editing. Editing is where the magic really happens. If you're a writer out there, you should approach your first draft as the most difficult and best thing you've ever done. And then you should sleep on it, and you should come back and read it a week later, and then you should be absolutely thrilled to start rewriting it, chopping it down, reading it out loud. Reading dialogue out loud actually helps, and this was one of the lessons, right? When you have an amazing actor like Mark Bonnar, reading out your dialogue in the moment, screaming it out, and it's having trouble getting out of his mouth because the sound's not right, the consonants are strange, the vowels are in the wrong places. That's a really good indication that you should rewrite.
In a world without gold, we might have been heroes.
And that's exactly what happened here. It was twice as long, and then suddenly this beautiful line came out. I wish I thought of it, on my first draft, but it was probably the 5th or 6th draft, and it was that 6th draft that happened on the floor of the mocap studio. And here it was also really tough because this is a historical moment where Blackbeard and all his crew are killed or rounded up by the British authorities. So how do we get you out of that? Well, we have a guy just body check you, and you have to swim to your ship, and then you gotta hit the turbos and get out of there. So that was kind of cool. Yeah. We even gave you a timer. I don't remember that. I wonder what happens when maybe a big cannonball takes off Edward's head, and that's the end of it, and you gotta start over. But yeah, that's great. So there you go. Raise the sails. Get out of there. a lot of the details of life at sea came from this really interesting book I read called, I think it's called 2 Years Before the Mast. Might be a different number, 3 years, 4 years, but I think it's called 2 Years Before the Mast. It was written in the early 1800s, so 19th century, early 19th century, more like the whaling period rather than the era of piracy. More like the time more Moby Dick would have been written. But it was a really fantastic memoir by this man whose name escapes me right now, but it's through him that I got a lot of detail about what it was like to just live at sea, the kind of language they would use. It's where a line that's earlier in the game, every finger's a fish hook. I think it came from that book, this idea that sailors are just people that have to be climbing the rigging constantly. You can see there, like all the webbing there. They'd be climbing up and coming down and going up to the crow's nest and, you know, adjusting sails and tying off sails. And so this idea, every finger's a fish hook. It's beautifully consonant, you know, a lot of F's. Short, concise, good image. And it really helped that, you know, sell the idea that Edward knew how to parkour as a pirate before he meets the assassins. And there you go, he drinks damnation. Damnation being capitalized. That was a lot of people asked me about that. That's a literary style that was popular for just about 100 or 150 years in English. I think it gained popularity in the 1600s and faded out by the early 1800s. But that every noun was capitalized, and this is what the Germans still do. But for some reason, it became popular briefly in English. If you read something like The General History of Pirates or some Daniel Defoe, like Robinson Crusoe, if you have a period-appropriate book, then that's what the book will look like. All the nouns will be capitalized. We jump forward here to another real pirate, Blackbeard Roberts. He was a Welshman, just like Edward. The process of putting this game together was a process of like picking which cool pirates you wanted. And we did not lack cool pirates in this time period. We actually couldn't use all of them. Ooh, here we go. Blackbeard doing all his crew dirty. But why does he need Edward? Well, he needs Edward just for a little while longer. Yeah, we just kind of had to go through the list of pirates, and there are a number of ones we left out. Sam Bellamy. I believe there's a famous Spanish pirate that we didn't use, and a French pirate. Levasseur, I think. I might be butchering his name. There were times when writing this that I almost felt like we still had too many pirates. When I went back and looked at the dialogue, the character Jack Rackham, he only has 26 lines of dialogue in this game. He actually makes a pretty stunning presence in the game for only 26 lines of dialogue. But that's pretty crazy to me because I thought that we'd whittled down the number of pirates in this to just the right number, and yet in the end I still feel like we didn't use Jack Rackham well enough.
There is nothing in my code about loyalty, boy. You played your role, but our partnership is done. You're a dead man, Roberts!
This is a little bit of a cheat. If you were in a gibbet like this as a pirate, you'd be dead. We had to find a way to kind of jump a little bit of time. So what would really happen in real life is that Edward would be executed, and they'd slap a big coat of tar on his body so that it didn't rot, too quickly, and then they just put you up there as a warning for all to see. And this is a small island off the coast, or just outside of Kingston, Jamaica. I can't remember what it's called. The name probably just came up and I missed it. But it was a small part of an extension of the city, basically, and they would put a lot of dead pirates here as a warning for any of the ships that were coming into port. And here here we see an assassin. Here you go, boom, haha. That was kind of fun. So we cheated. We let Edward be alive. Maybe the British authorities are trying to get something out of him. The Templars want him alive because they want to know where the observatory is. Any number of reasons why they would have kept him alive. But here, our assassin, our Mayan assassin. He comes and saves Edward. I like kind of this ragged look of Edward's. It looks like he's wearing like some Keith Richards eye makeup, looking good. And I don't know if you can wear this as an outfit. Here's something. Here's something that we did. So Jack Rackham, like I was saying, not a lot of dialogue in our game, and then he ends up in a gibbet himself. Now this is a proper gibbet. This is a skeleton. The tendons are hanging together, just barely. We also have a situation where you can go eavesdrop and hear the fate of Stede Bonnet, which was the gentleman pirate. For anyone who's watching Our Flag Means Death, it tells the story of Stede Bonnet. And I like to think that the creators of that show, I hope that they played Assassin's Creed 4 and that maybe inspired them to take up and expand on Stede Bonnet's story, because his story is sort of naturally comical. He's a guy that owned a plantation and had a family, but really wanted to be a pirate. Just loved that idea of adventure, but then was not a very good one, and took a whole wardrobe with him, bought his first ship instead of stealing it. You're kind of getting off on the wrong foot if that's how you get your first pirate ship. If you don't steal it, I think that's kind of piracy 101. Anyway, so you learn the fate of a number of pirates here in this sequence, right? There's Jack Rackham. Charles Vane was there. He gets jailed and dies in prison, I believe. And then Anne, Bonny, and Mary Read, they end up in prison too. We all put them all in the same place. So the legacy of Edward's time as a pirate is all kind of coming crashing down here at this nexus.
Mary, it's me, Edward.
Edward? Who's this fella?
It's all right, Anne. He's a friend. What's wrong with Mary?
She's ill.
And her child?
They took her.
We didn't spend too much time, but we James Kidd, the pirate in our game, ultimately is revealed as Mary Read. I don't believe we know the name that Mary Read went by. Maybe we do. Someone told me we did, but I never found it in my research. So I pretended that that she passed herself off as the son of William Kidd, the pirate from about a decade earlier. But Mary Read was a very real pirate. Was known to have passed herself off as a man sometimes, not always. I think there might have been among pirate crews room for anybody who wanted to be a pirate. There was a little bit less prejudice, or a little bit more openness to gathering wayward souls. I'm sure it wasn't utopian, but it was possibly preferable to the society at large. But here we wanted something really, really sort of slow, and I think the scene speaks for itself. I don't really want to explain what's happening. But I will say that one of the things we wanted to do at the end of this, for those who don't know, after Mary passes away, we had this situation where, like, okay, do we pick her back up in a cutscene? The scene itself feels very, very complete when she dies, and we let that sadness linger, and then we say, oh, there's more people coming. There's guards coming to get Edward. He has to make a decision, and we thought, why don't we put the pressure on the player and try to see what they will do. So we actually don't pick Mary back up in the cutscene, or actually no, do we? Now that I'm thinking about it, but it's possible to leave her behind. That's the point. We wanted to see how many people would leave her behind, and how many people would sort of suffer the difficulty of carrying her through the next few encounters with guards. And I don't think that... Okay, so we do pick her up again. Yeah, I see it. 10 years and things slip your mind. So we do pick her up, but we actually we put you in situations where you have to put her back down, oh, here we go. That's nice. I've never seen the data on this. I don't even know if we have the data, but how many people actually carry her all the way to this this reach location. So yeah, here we go. Like this player, beautiful, whoever he is, has decided to bring Mary to the boat. And historically, we know that Mary died in prison. We don't know what happened to Anne Bonny. I read recently that someone recently uncovered the name of, I think, an Anne Bonny or an Anne or something, who like the obituary of somebody who closely fits her description or whatever. So it may be that we are a little closer to learning that Anne Bonny survived her ordeal in prison, which is, that's exactly what we portrayed here. She went on to become a pirate and possibly an assassin later. I don't know. But definitely she joined Edward's crew, and she becomes your quartermaster after Adewale leaves.
One stroke of an eagle soaring high above a shepherd's field that swooped down on powerful wings to seize a grazing lamb, carrying home to her nest. Flying close by.
So yeah, we're in a dream sequence now, and Woodes Rogers is retelling a fairy tale that we found called The Eagle and the Jackdaw. By a very weird coincidence, I had chosen the name of Edward's ship, the Jackdaw, already before I found this fairy tale. And because a jackdaw sounded cooler than a crow and a raven, but it was the same family of birds, and it seemed to be like a great opposition to an eagle, which is what the assassins were. And just by a weird stroke of luck, someone pointed me out that, hey, there's an Aesop fable, The Eagle and the Jackdaw, and it's about an eagle who, it's about a jackdaw who like thinks that he's an eagle, and he wants to be as majestic as an eagle. And if that wasn't a sign from heaven that fairy tale had to make it into our game, I don't know what is, because this is exactly what Edward's story is. He's a jackdaw. He's a thief. He's pretending or passing himself off as an eagle, which is the symbol of the assassins, and has been since the first game. Altair means eagle. Ezio means eagle. So that was an incredible piece of synchronicity. And so when I first learned it, it was still pretty early in production, so we still had time to write a scene around it, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to say, okay, Woodes Rogers is going to tell this story about the eagle and the jackdaw, and Edward's gonna hit Edward smack in the face about what he's doing.
I'm not an easy man to call a friend, am I? Is that why you're here?
To fight beside a man so driven by personal gain and glory is a hard thing.
And so now finally, yeah. So after reaching the nadir of his life and seeing a lot of his friends die and other friends leave him behind, like Adewale, he kind of comes to realize that this path he's on is not going to lead him to the place that he originally wanted to get to, which was to be a man of quality for his wife and his family. It's just his wife at that time. This speech here where he said, "For years I've been rushing around," is one of the last things I wrote for the game. I remember writing it at my kitchen table, probably in early 2013, maybe March, April of 2013, and actually really feeling affected by it. I don't often cry while writing. I don't think I cried then, but it was definitely I kind of got a little emotional writing it, because I knew that I was finishing the game, and I knew that I felt like I'd found just the right lines for Edward to say, and that the whole of the game kind of comes right to that line. And for all his effort and for all his emotional growth, he gets a new weapon. He gets the rope dart. which maybe a lot of people missed, you know, but that's cool. You don't have too many more missions to use it, but that is the reward for coming to realize that you want to be a better man. It's a rope dart. But no, I think it was great to reach that moment. It's a pretty long script. I think it's somewhere in the order of about 5,000 lines for the main story, which was sizable, especially at that time. It was the longest game I'd ever written. So now we're kind of Edward's basically cleaning up. You know, he's kind of mentally he's joined the Assassins, even if he hasn't sort of officially joined. But mentally and emotionally he's there, and he wants to sort of right the wrongs that he's helped create. This is a nice cameo. There's a couple cameos of our side characters. We called them the Templar Hunts. This is one of them. If you play the Templar Hunt side quests, you'll encounter this guy. The Templar side quests were written by Jill Murray, and then I think later there's a Scottish assassin who you come into contact with in Havana. She also appears in the side quest. So like for people who've already done them, it's a nice little callback, and if you haven't, then it's a pleasant surprise probably.
Settle down. There's no need for me.
When I'm done, good and ready. Va bene. I am ready. We go.
This particular quest was fun because we kind of just shoehorned it in, but it was great. Not a lot of Italians, I think, in the West Indies, but we decided we'd bring one Italian back. While you're trying to find the location of Woodes Rogers. And so we created this Italian diplomat character. And who better to bring back to play a drunk Italian than Roger Craig Smith himself, the voice of Ezio. So we had him basically kind of, the character that I wrote for him was basically if Ezio had never joined the Assassins and had just stayed a kind of a wealthy patrician in Italy, or I can't remember exactly what his family was, a noble or a patrician, and if he'd grown into old age, and well, the timeline wouldn't have worked out, but this is kind of like maybe what he would have turned out to be, just a sort of a dilettante or a grumpy diplomat. So we had fun, and this is, I can't remember. We recorded this pretty late in the game, I'm sure, but it's always great to work with Roger Craig Smith, and he had a lot of fun with this character. And with our Assassin's Creed VR game coming up, we get to see even more Roger Craig Smith reprising his role as Ezio, which is fantastic. And here we've jumped all the way forward to killing the last of the Templars. So we kind of dispatched the rest of them. Woodes Rogers, got rid of him. Although Woodes Rogers didn't die at this time period. He died a bit later. So we injure him severely and we reveal that he survived. Torres did die around this time. Torres is, you know, he's mad at Edward for killing him, but I think he kind of he gives Edward a good lesson here. You know, there's these white rooms are always, we call them white rooms or kill rooms. This room is not white. It's always a fun time as a writer to let these, you know, two personalities spar. And this is, I think, where Edward gets to portray himself at his most mature. He really understands the kind of the Templar mindset, or let's say the authoritarian mindset of somebody like Torres, who believes in some sort of natural division of classes and believes that the smartest people in the room should rule everyone else unquestioningly. So this is, I think if Edward has to submit a kind of an application to the Assassins and, you know, say, tell us why you want to be an assassin, maybe the best thing he could give is a transcript of that speech that he gives to Torres, because it shows that he really understands the assassin mindset. And here we kind of it's always interesting when we dealt with first Civ artifacts and first Civ locations. We always had to ask ourselves, how would the assassins use it? How would they feel about it? How would the Templars use it? Would the assassins try to use it to their advantage, or would they just sort of say, you know what, we should probably leave this be? It's like nuclear weapons. That's kind of how I always thought about it. Is like first Civ technology is a bit like nuclear weapons in that they exist. You can't get rid of them. You have to manage them. They're capable of doing great harm. Possibly in the right hands, nuclear technology in general can be useful, but in the wrong hands, it can be very deadly. So that was always the metaphor I kind of used. And whenever a piece of Eden appears in a game that, at least that I've worked on, I want it to be as sort of dangerous and as a nuclear technology. You want to believe that it has some utility, but also an extreme amount of danger. And I think a place like the observatory, which is, we kind of portray it as a ancient surveillance system, right? It's like ancient. I think we joked more than once that it was like a first Civ CTV. And now we go all the way to the end of the game. This scene was, the idea for this scene is something that I remember thinking about very early. Possibly even I wrote it very early, or a version of it very early. And the song that Bonny sings, "The Parting Glass," is a song that I had loved for many years before writing this game. I always had a fondness for Irish music, Irish literature. I have a master's degree in Irish literature from the National University of Ireland, Dublin. I went to school in Ireland. The culture and the literature and the songs are really close to my heart. And so The Parting Glass is something that I've known for a long time. And as soon as we started thinking about the ideas in this game, and the journey that Edward would go on, the lyrics to The Parting Glass seemed like a very natural fit. It's about a person saying goodbye. It's about a person acknowledging past wrongs. It's about a person sort of trying to start a new chapter in their life, knowing that they hadn't been the best they could be. And it's a very bittersweet song. And the melody, as with all Irish music, it's the melody is always sweet, and the lyrics are often bitter or sad. So we wanted to just leave Edward here with just reflecting on the place he'd gone. You see the table there is, well, the first shot of the table is just a bunch of pirates, but we do a quick insert of all of Edward's pirate friends, all the people he's lost over this story, and it's a kind of a Star Wars moment, isn't it? You know, it's like at the end of Return of the Jedi. There was a time where I wanted this whole scene to be, I think it runs almost exactly 2 minutes. I wanted it to be twice as long. We actually recorded quite a bit more. Well, actually, no, the recording you hear of the song goes on longer, but it goes over the credits. And I'd always kind of hoped that we could expand the scene to have the entire song. But, you know, we were always working with time constraints and budgets, and so I still think it's a fantastic scene.
I can't so parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
I think if I wrote this game differently, I would probably try to smooth over and try to depict differently the way that Edward learns that he lost, that his wife had passed on, but that he has a daughter. I don't think we did it the right way. We kind of do it off screen. It might have been a better way to do it, but what I do love is this moment. We had it near the very end of the production, to have Edward effectively sailing back to England, but with his daughter now, kind of as his quartermaster. And just this idea of having, you know, dialogue between them and chatting. I would have written 10 times the amount of dialogue. I would have written enough dialogue to cover the entire credit sequence if they'd let me. But, you know, all good things must come to an end. And so there it is. That was Black Flag. I'm incredibly pleased that after 10 years, I still get people writing to me about Black Flag, how much it means to them. It meant a lot to me. It was really the first game that I think I'd ever written in. I've been writing games since 1999, 2000, and this one in 2000. When I wrote the bulk of it in 2012, 2013, it was really, I think, the first time I felt like I was really had everything at my disposal to make something good. And by that I mean the team itself. We were all firing on all, you know, 8 cylinders. I should have a ship metaphor, not a car metaphor. But the team was fantastic, and it was a very smooth project. We all knew exactly what we wanted to make. We all loved this world. We loved the characters. So, you know, in game development, if one thing works but the rest don't, then the game probably doesn't work. You can't. It's very hard to pull one thing out of a game and go, well, at least there's that. You know, the games are big, complicated machines, and they all have to fire off together. And if all the pieces in this fantastic team hadn't been working together, it wouldn't have mattered how good the dialogue was. And so I really, you know, I miss that team. I miss those days. But you know, we're always taking what we learned back then and going forward. So thanks for everyone who stuck with me on this hour. Was it an hour? I don't even know how long it was. And thanks for playing. And on behalf of the entire team that made this, and on behalf of everybody at Ubisoft in the AC family, thank you. And we'll see you next time.